In this tutorial, we will be looking at the rolled foot. The reasons that we would do a rolled foot versus a regular foot ring are if you can't take any more clay away from your bottom because it's too thin, if your clay is too soft to do a proper regular foot ring, or sometimes I just like the visually soft look that it has. The first step to trimming anything is getting your pot centered on the wheel. And so what I do in order to get this as close to the center as I can is slowly spin my wheel, and using a noodle tool I will draw a circle in the bottom of my pot. If your circle isn't evenly in the center of your pot, move it so that anywhere that there's more clay, you're moving it in the opposite direction. Once it's perfectly in the center, or as close as you can get it, we take very wet clay and begin to roll it out and break it into smaller pieces so that we can start placing it on the outside of our pot. When you put it on the outside, you want to make sure that you are pressing it firmly to the bat, but you're not going to push in the edges of your mug in this case. If I were to push too hard, I could ruin the rim or crack it. And if I were to push too soft and not firmly attach it to my wheel, once I start trimming, it could come off, which is never fun. And if that does happen, sometimes you can just re-center it and put it back, and sometimes you will break your piece. So it is important to firmly attach your mug, bowl, pot, whatever you're trimming to your bat. For this mug, I added a lot of clay, which may not have been entirely necessary, but as you start trimming things that are taller rather than, say, a low, wide bowl, the more pressure that you're adding at the top, the more likely you are to push it over or pull it out. And so with things like tall mugs and vases, I tend to add more clay so that it's firmly secure and so that I don't have to worry about it coming off, especially because when we pull, we are adding a lot of pressure to the top and pushing into the side. Here I am removing excess clay with my trimming tool. Before I attached and centered my mug, I checked the inside and noticed that when I was pulling, I didn't quite take off or pull as much of the clay from the bottom as I probably should have. And so I'm just removing extra clay right now and kind of adding more of a design element to it. Here I am taking away that line that I used to center it and just smoothing out the top. Now is a great time to add surface design on the top. One of my favorite things about rolling the foot is that you can add that design and then roll the foot over it, and it's just something really interesting and something that you don't see on a regular foot ring. Now that we're going to start pulling our foot ring, we need to have wet hands so that our fingers will glide over the clay, and we're literally going to pull the clay just as we would a wall by putting our finger underneath that ridge and then slowly lifting and pushing up. If your clay is soft, this should be fairly easy, but the harder that your clay gets, the more difficult that it might be. Anytime that we're on the wheel, it's really important that we have good control of our hands and the clay. Right now I have my right elbow braced into my hip and I'm kind of putting my weight on it so that my hands aren't going all over the place and I have control of where the clay is going and that my hands are steady. Once you roll your foot, you want to make sure that you are not trapping air on the inside, and so as you work the clay up and over, make sure that you're pushing on the outside edge from the outside in to just push out any air that you have in there. After I smoothed out my edges, I signed my mug, and now it's time to remove the clay that's been holding it on. And this is important that now that you're finished and done, that you don't ruin your project at this step. So I like to use a rib just to kind of lift up that wet clay. And that's a rolled foot. It's definitely a different way of doing your foot ring. I find it very visually interesting. It's more of a softer look, and there's definitely lots of ways that you can do it. You can pull a really high foot ring, or you can keep it small. Hopefully this video was helpful, and thanks for watching.